My name is Savannah Matthews, and I'm 28 years old. Last Christmas, what should have been our family's most joyful celebration became the moment that shattered everything I believed about blood loyalty and unconditional love. As I sat at our mahogany dining table surrounded by twinkling lights and the aroma of honey-glazed ham, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and delivered words that would change our family forever. "You're not on the will anymore, Savannah." What she didn't know was that I had prepared a present that would expose decades of lies and turn her perfect Christmas into her worst nightmare. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family drama that literally happened at Christmas dinner, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story about family betrayal that'll make your jaw drop, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this revenge tale has more twists than a pretzel factory. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes blood isn't thicker than justice. Let's unwrap this Christmas catastrophe together. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, I always knew I lived in my older brother Derek's shadow. Our colonial-style home on Magnolia Lane was filled with his soccer trophies, academic awards, and photographs of him shaking hands with local politicians at various charity events. Derek, now 31, had followed our father's footsteps into real estate development, while I had chosen what my parents considered the impractical path of becoming a social worker. Savannah helps drug addicts and homeless people, my mother, Patricia Matthews, would tell her bridge club friends with barely concealed disappointment. It's charitable work. The way she said it made it sound like I was cleaning sewers rather than helping rebuild lives. Meanwhile, Derek's every business deal was celebrated like he'd just discovered a cure for cancer. My father, Robert Matthews, had built Matthews Development from the ground up, turning it into one of Richmond's most successful real estate companies. The family wealth was substantial. Multiple properties, investment portfolios, and a business worth several $1 million. Derek had been groomed since childhood to inherit it all, and I had always assumed I'd receive some portion, maybe enough to pay off my student loans and buy a modest house. But our family dynamics were more complex than they appeared. Derek's wife Miranda had joined our family 5 years ago, and she had a way of whispering poison into my mother's ear. During family gatherings, I'd catch snippets of their conversations. "Savannah's career choice reflects poorly on the family name," or "she's not investing in her future the way Derek has." Miranda had positioned herself as the daughter my mother never had, complete with shared shopping trips and weekly lunch dates. The tension had been building for months. My parents had started making comments about people who contribute to society versus those who drain resources. They'd begun excluding me from business discussions and family financial planning meetings. When I'd asked about it, my mother had dismissed my concerns with a wave of her manicured hand. "Oh, Savannah, you wouldn't be interested in such boring matters." What hurt most was watching Derek's passive acceptance of this treatment. We'd been close as children, building blanket forts and sharing midnight snacks, but success had changed him. He'd become comfortable with being the favorite, comfortable with my diminishing role in the family hierarchy. When I'd tried to talk to him about feeling excluded, he'd shrugged and said, "Maybe if you'd made different choices." The warning signs were all there, but I'd convinced myself that family meant something more than financial contribution. I believed that despite our differences, blood was thicker than water, and that my parents' love, while perhaps not equally distributed, was still genuine. I thought Christmas dinner would be different, a chance for us to reconnect and remember what really mattered. Instead, it became the stage for the most devastating betrayal of my life. As I drove to my childhood home that Christmas Eve, carrying carefully wrapped presents and a naive hope for reconciliation, I had no idea that I was walking into an ambush that would destroy every assumption I'd held about family. Loyalty. The worst part, I was about to discover that the betrayal ran deeper than I could have ever imagined, and that my mother's cruel announcement was just the tip of an iceberg that would sink everything I thought I knew about the people. who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of pristine snowfall that makes Richmond look like a Hallmark movie set. I pulled into my parents' circular driveway, noting Derek's new BMW parked next to Miranda's Range Rover. The house was decorated with enough lights to be seen from space, and the massive wreath on the front door probably cost more than most people's entire Christmas budget. Inside the scene was picture perfect. My mother had outdone herself with the decorations. A 12-foot Fraser fir dominated the living room, adorned with ornaments collected over 3 decades of family Christmases. The smell of cinnamon and pine filled the air, and Bing Crosby crooned softly from the sound system. This was the Christmas card version of our family, the one my mother posted on social media to maintain appearances. Savannah, darling. My mother swept toward me in a cloud of expensive perfume and silk. Patricia Matthews was 58 but looked 45 thanks to an excellent plastic surgeon and a dedicated personal trainer. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You look, well," she said, her eyes scanning my off-the-rack dress, with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for roadkill. Derek and Miranda were already settled on the Italian leather sofa, looking like they'd stepped out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. Derek had inherited our father's tall frame and distinguished features, while Miranda was petite and blonde with the kind of aggressive prettiness that came from years of beauty pageants and sorority life. "Hey, little sister," Derek said without getting up, his attention focused on his phone. "How's the, what do you call it, social justice warrior thing going?" "It's called helping people, Derek," I replied, settling into the chair across from them. "You might want to try it sometime." Miranda laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking crystal. "Oh, Savannah, you're so noble. I just don't know how you do it working with those people. Aren't you afraid of catching something?" Before I could respond, my father entered the room carrying a tray of his famous Christmas morning mimosas. Robert Matthews was 61, silver-haired, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd never faced a real challenge he couldn't buy his way out of. "There's my girl," he said, handing me a glass. "How's my favorite social worker?" The emphasis on favorite was clearly meant to be affectionate, but it felt patronizing. I was his only social worker daughter, just like Derek was his only son. The distinction felt meaningless and somehow diminishing. We exchanged gifts with the ritualistic precision of a well-rehearsed play. Derek and Miranda received expensive jewelry, electronics, and an envelope that I later learned contained keys to a new vacation condo in the Outer Banks. My gifts were thoughtful but modest: a nice scarf, some books, and a spa gift certificate. The disparity was impossible to ignore, but I'd learned to accept it years ago. I gave my parents a photo album I'd spent weeks creating, filled with pictures from our family vacations and childhood memories. My mother flipped through it quickly, offering polite thanks before setting it aside. Derek and Miranda received personalized gifts that I'd chosen carefully: a vintage wine for Derek's collection, and a beautiful jewelry box for Miranda that I'd found at an antique shop. "These are lovely, Savannah," Miranda said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How creative." The conversation during gift opening was strained but civil. We talked about Derek's latest business acquisition, Miranda's volunteer work with the Junior League, and my parents' recent cruise to the Mediterranean. When the topic turned to my work, the questions felt perfunctory, like checking items off a list. Still working at that. "What's it called?" my mother asked. "Richmond Community Services," I replied for what felt like the 100th time. "I'm actually up for a promotion to program director." "That's nice, dear," she said, already turning her attention to cleaning up the wrapping paper. As we prepared for Christmas dinner, I helped in the kitchen while Miranda lounged in the living room, claiming she was hopeless with cooking. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter-in-law got to relax while the actual daughter did the work. But I'd grown used to these dynamics, telling myself that family harmony was worth the occasional inequality. The dining room was set with my grandmother's china and sterling silver crystal goblets catching the light from the chandelier above. This was where we'd shared countless family meals, where I'd blown out birthday candles and announced school achievements. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, as I looked around the table at my family's faces, I felt like an outsider looking in. There was something in their expressions, a shared knowledge that excluded me. They kept exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking, and conversations would stop abruptly when I entered a room. The feeling of being unwelcome in my own family home was subtle but persistent, like a low-grade fever that never quite breaks. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of work and the holiday season was making me overly sensitive. But deep down, I knew something had shifted, and whatever was coming next would change everything. Dinner proceeded with the kind of forced cheerfulness that makes your face ache from fake smiling. My mother had prepared her usual Christmas feast: honey-glazed ham, roasted turkey, sweet potato casserole, green bean almondine, and her famous cranberry sauce that she'd been making from the same recipe for 30 years. Everything was perfect, from the presentation to the timing, but the atmosphere felt like we were all actors in a play where no one had told me the script had changed. The conversation remained superficial through the main course. Derek talked about expanding his business into North Carolina. Miranda shared gossip from her country club, and my parents discussed their plans for a spring trip to Tuscany. I contributed when spoken to, but mostly felt like a spectator at my own family dinner. It was during dessert, my mother's traditional Christmas trifle, that the bomb dropped. "Savannah," my mother said, setting down her spoon with deliberate precision, "your father and I have been discussing some important family matters, and we feel it's time to be honest with you about certain decisions we've made." The way she said it, with that particular tone she used when delivering bad news, made my stomach clench. I looked around the table and realized that Derek and Miranda weren't surprised by this announcement. They were watching me with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for car accidents or reality TV drama. "We've updated our will," my father continued, his voice taking on the formal tone he used in business meetings. "And after considerable thought and discussion, we've decided that your portion of the inheritance will be redistributed." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Redistributed? You're not on the will anymore, Savannah," my mother said, her voice as crisp and cold as the December air outside. "We've decided to leave everything to Derek and Miranda." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the soft hum of the heating system, and what sounded like my heart breaking in real time. "I don't understand," I managed to say, though my voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "It's really quite simple," Miranda chimed in, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "Your parents want to ensure their legacy is preserved by family members who share their values and contribute meaningfully to society. What Miranda means," Derek added, finally looking directly at me, "is that they want their money to go to people who will use it responsibly. People who understand business and investment, not someone who's going to donate it all to homeless shelters and drug rehabilitation programs." Hey everyone, I need to pause here for just a second because I know some of you are probably screaming at your screens right now. I was certainly screaming inside that dining room. If this story is hitting you in the feels and you want to see how this family drama unfolds, make sure you're subscribed, because the revenge I'm about to unleash is absolutely epic. And honestly, after what you're about to hear next, you'll understand why sometimes the best Christmas presents come wrapped in justice. Let's see how deep this betrayal really goes. The full weight of what was happening began to settle over me like a suffocating blanket. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in anger or disappointment. This was planned, calculated, and cruel. They had invited me to Christmas dinner specifically to humiliate me, to deliver this devastating news in front of the entire family like some twisted holiday entertainment. "This is because of my job?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Because I chose to help people instead of making money. This is because you've shown no interest in building anything lasting," my father replied. "You live paycheck to paycheck. You have no investments, no property, no business sense whatsoever. If we left you money, you'd just give it away to whatever cause caught your fancy that week. And frankly," my mother added, "we're tired of pretending that your choices don't embarrass us. Do you know what it's like when our friends ask what our daughter does for a living when we have to explain that you work in some facility with criminals and addicts?" The casual cruelty of her words was breathtaking. These were the people who had raised me, who had supposedly loved me unconditionally. And now they were sitting here calmly explaining why I was unworthy of their love or support. "We've also decided," Derek said, clearly enjoying this moment, "that it would be best if you didn't attend family gatherings anymore. It's just awkward, you know. We're moving in different circles now, and your presence makes things uncomfortable for everyone." Miranda nodded sympathetically, as if she was doing me a favor. "We're not trying to be mean, Savannah. We just think it would be easier for everyone if you found your own path separate from the family business and social obligations." I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA, who had been present for every birthday, every graduation, every milestone of my life, and realized that I was looking at strangers. Worse than strangers. I was looking at enemies who had been wearing the masks of family for years. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have anticipated, was that I had come prepared for this possibility. For months, I'd sensed the shifting dynamics, felt the growing coldness, and heard the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. So I had done what any good social worker does when faced with suspicious behavior I had investigated. And what I had discovered was going to turn this Christmas dinner into their worst nightmare. Because the present I had brought wasn't just a gift. It was justice wrapped in a neat little bow, and I was about to deliver it with a smile. 3 months earlier, I had started noticing things that didn't add up. During my occasional visits to the family home, I observed changes that seemed subtle but significant. My mother had new jewelry that she claimed was inherited from Aunt Eleanor, despite the fact that Aunt Eleanor had died penniless. Derek was driving luxury cars that seemed beyond even his considerable income, and Miranda had suddenly become very interested in expensive art and antiques. What really triggered my suspicions was overhearing a phone conversation between my mother and someone she called Richard about moving funds and keeping things quiet until after the holidays. Patricia Matthews was many things, but financially secretive had never been one of them. She loved bragging about their investments and wealth to anyone who would listen. Being a social worker had taught me to recognize the signs of financial abuse and embezzlement. I'd worked with enough elderly clients who had been taken advantage of by family members to know the warning signs. The secretive phone calls, the sudden lifestyle upgrades, the deliberate exclusion from family financial discussions. It all pointed to something deeply wrong. So I did what I'd been trained to do. I started documenting everything. I began by researching public records through the county clerk's office. Property transfers, business filings, and court documents are all public information if you know where to look. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Over the past 18 months, my parents had transferred ownership of 3 rental properties to Derek's name for what appeared to be significantly below market value. On paper, it looked like estate planning, but the timing and amounts didn't make sense. Next, I called my father's longtime accountant, Jim Morrison, under the pretense of wanting to learn more about financial planning for my own future. Jim had known me since childhood and was happy to chat about building wealth responsibly. During our conversation, he mentioned being confused about some recent changes to my parents' financial structure that Derek had insisted were necessary for tax purposes. "Your brother's quite the businessman," Jim had said, with what I now recognized as uncertainty rather than admiration. "Some of his strategies are aggressive, but he assures me everything is above board. The real breakthrough came when I remembered that my mother had always kept important documents in the same place, a filing cabinet in my father's home office. During a family dinner in October, I had excused myself to use the bathroom and made a quick detour to the office. What I found in that filing cabinet would have sent any financial crimes investigator into overdrive. There were multiple bank statements showing large transfers between accounts, loan documents that my father had apparently signed but seemed confused about based on his handwritten notes in the margins, and most damning of all, a series of contracts transferring business assets to Derek that were dated and signed during a period when my father had been heavily medicated following his minor heart attack last spring. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking as I realized the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just family favoritism or natural inheritance planning. This was systematic financial elder abuse, and Derek was orchestrating it with Miranda's full knowledge and my mother's eager participation. The most shocking discovery was a handwritten note in my mother's careful script that said, "D says we need to cut S out completely. She'll cause problems with the transfers if she knows. Better to make it seem like punishment for her life choices. M agrees this is cleanest solution." My own mother had written those words about me. She wasn't just complicit in Derek's scheme. She was an active participant in both the financial manipulation and the emotional abuse designed to justify cutting me out of the family entirely. But the smoking gun was a series of emails I found printed out and filed away, apparently by mistake. They were exchanges between Derek and a business associate discussing convincing the old man to sign over assets before he gets too confused, and managing Patricia's concerns about Savannah getting suspicious. One email, dated just 2 weeks before Christmas, read, "The Christmas dinner plan should work perfectly. Once we tell Savannah about the will, she'll probably storm out and never speak to us again. Problem solved, and we look like the victims of her dramatic overreaction." They had planned this entire scenario as a way to eliminate me from their lives while making it appear that I was the one choosing to leave. They wanted to steal from my parents and cut me out of the inheritance, but they also wanted to maintain their reputation as the innocent victims of a difficult, ungrateful daughter. As I sat in my car outside my parents' house that October evening, staring at the photos on my phone, I felt something inside me fundamentally change. These people had betrayed not just me, but my father as well. They were taking advantage of his age and health issues to manipulate him into signing away his life's work, and they were using my mother's social insecurities and prejudices against my career to turn her into an accomplice. That's when I decided that if they wanted to play games, I would give them a game they'd never forget. But I wouldn't stoop to their level of cruelty and manipulation. Instead, I would use the truth as my weapon, and justice would be my revenge. I spent the next 2 months gathering additional evidence, consulting with a lawyer friend about elder abuse laws, and preparing for what I knew would be the most important confrontation of my life. By the time Christmas arrived, I had enough documentation to not only expose their scheme, but to potentially send Derek to prison for financial elder abuse and fraud. What they didn't realize as they delivered their carefully rehearsed Christmas cruelty was that I hadn't come to that dinner as a victim. I had come as an investigator, a prosecutor, and an executioner, all rolled into one. And the present I was about to give them would destroy their perfect little conspiracy more effectively than any tantrum or emotional outburst ever could. The best part, they were going to destroy themselves, and I was just going to sit back and watch it happen. After my family finished delivering their devastating news with all the ceremony of carving a Christmas turkey, they sat back in their chairs with satisfied expressions, clearly expecting me to break down in tears or storm out in dramatic fashion. Instead, I smiled and reached for my purse. "Well," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "since we're exchanging such meaningful gifts tonight, I have something special for all of you, too." I pulled out a beautifully wrapped package. Red paper with a gold bow, completely innocent and festive. I was saving this for after dinner, but it seems like the perfect moment. Derek and Miranda exchanged glances, probably wondering if I was about to have some kind of emotional breakdown. My mother tilted her head with fake concern, already preparing to comfort herself about how difficult I was being. "What is it, sweetheart?" my father asked, and I could hear genuine confusion in his voice. Of everyone at this table, he was the only one who didn't know what was really happening. "It's something I put together over the past few months," I said, untying the bow with deliberate slowness. "A little family history project. I thought you'd all be interested in seeing how our family business has grown and changed recently." Inside the box was a thick folder, professionally bound with clear plastic sleeves protecting each document. The cover page read Matthew's Family Financial Activity, a comprehensive review, October 2023, December 2024. I handed it to my father first, watching as his eyes widened when he saw the title page. "Savannah, what is this? Open it, Dad. I think you'll find it fascinating." As he began flipping through the pages, I started my presentation like I was delivering a case report at work. "So what we have here is a complete documentation of all property transfers, business, asset movements, and financial transactions involving Matthews Development and associated family accounts over the past 18 months. Derek's face had gone completely white. "Savannah, what the hell are you doing? I'm giving you exactly what you wanted, brother dear. Transparency, honesty, family togetherness." I smiled sweetly. "Keep reading, Dad. Page 3 is particularly interesting. It shows how the Riverside Apartments property was transferred to Derek for $50,000 when the market value was actually $300,000. My father's hands were shaking as he turned pages. I don't remember agreeing to this price." "That's because you signed those papers while you were on pain medication after your heart procedure," I continued conversationally. "Derek was very helpful in managing your business affairs while you were recovering, very creative in his management style." Miranda tried to interrupt. "This is ridiculous, Savannah. You're obviously misunderstanding normal business." "Oh, I'm not finished," I said, my voice taking on the professional tone I used when testifying in court cases. Page 7 documents the series of loans that Derek arranged using Dad's business as collateral. Loans that Dad apparently never approved or even knew about based on his own handwritten notes questioning the payments. The room had gone completely silent, except for the sound of my father turning pages and his increasingly labored breathing. Derek was gripping his napkins so tightly his knuckles were white, and my mother looked like she was going to be sick. "But my personal favorite," I continued, "is page 12. Derek, would you like to read that email exchange out loud? The one where you discuss managing the old man and making sure he signs documents before his health gets worse." "Stop," Derek said, his voice barely a whisper. "Or maybe page 15, where you and Miranda discuss the timeline for getting me completely cut out of the family so I can't interfere with your financial planning. That was a nice touch involving Mom and the emotional manipulation while you handled the paperwork." My father looked up from the folder, his face a mixture of betrayal and rage that I'd never seen before. "Derek, is this true?" For a moment, Derek tried to maintain his composure. "Dad, you don't understand. I was protecting your interests, making sure you stole from me." My father's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "You manipulated me while I was sick, you forged my signature, and you convinced your mother to help you emotionally abuse your sister to cover it up." "Robert, surely there's some explanation," my mother began, but my father's look silenced her immediately. "Patricia, did you know about this?" He held up a copy of her handwritten note about cutting me out to hide the transfers. The color drained from her face as she realized I had evidence of her active participation. "I..." "Derek said it was just estate planning. You wrote that cutting out your daughter was the cleanest solution," I said, reading directly from her note. You helped orchestrate tonight's little performance to manipulate me into walking away so I couldn't interfere with Derek's theft. The beautiful Christmas dinner had transformed into a crime scene investigation, with me as the lead detective and my family as the exposed criminals. The expensive china and crystal suddenly looked like props in a stage play, and the warm lighting seemed harsh and unforgiving. "There's more," I said, enjoying the way they all flinched. "Bank records showing systematic withdrawal of Dad's retirement funds, property deeds signed under suspicious circumstances, and my personal favorite, a recorded phone conversation where Derek discusses how to handle Savannah if she gets too close to the truth." Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You're insane. You recorded private conversations." "No, Derek. You recorded them. Apparently you butt-dialed me during one of your planning sessions with Miranda. I have 43 minutes of you two discussing how to steal Dad's assets and frame it as legitimate business planning. Would you like me to play it? The sound quality is surprisingly good." That was when Derek finally broke. "You sanctimonious bitch. You think you're so much better than us with your pathetic little job and your self-righteous attitude. You've never contributed anything to this family, and there it is," I said calmly. The real Derek, everyone. Not the successful businessman, not the dutiful son, but a thief and a manipulator who was willing to destroy his own father to get rich quick. My father was still staring at the documents, occasionally looking up at Derek with an expression of complete devastation. "How much?" he asked quietly. "I'm sorry," Derek said. "How much did you steal from me?" I consulted my notes. "Based on the documentation, approximately $2.3 million in assets, plus whatever cash withdrawals I couldn't track through the business accounts, probably closer to $3 million total." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Miranda started crying, not from remorse but from fear of what was coming next. My mother sat frozen in her chair, finally understanding that her participation in this scheme was about to destroy everything she cared about: her reputation, her social standing, and her marriage. But I wasn't done yet. The best part of my present was still to come. "Now," I said, reaching back into my purse, "I have one more gift for everyone." I pulled out a stack of business cards and placed them on the table like I was dealing poker cards. Detective Maria Rodriguez, Financial Crimes Division. Detective James Chen, Elder Abuse Unit. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Martinez, White Collar Crimes. And my personal favorite? Agent Michael Thompson, FBI Financial Fraud Task Force. The silence in the room was deafening. Derek's face had gone from white to green, and I thought he might actually throw up right there on my mother's precious Persian rug. "You see," I continued in the same conversational tone I'd been using all evening as a social worker specializing in elder abuse cases, "I'm actually a mandated reporter. Which means when I discover evidence of financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, I'm legally required to report it to the appropriate authorities." My father looked confused. "Vulnerable adults. People over 65 who may be susceptible to manipulation due to health issues, medication, or cognitive changes," I explained gently. "Your heart attack and subsequent medication made you a protected class, Dad. Derek's exploitation of your condition while you were recovering isn't just morally wrong, it's a felony." I turned back to Derek, who was now gripping the edge of the table. "I filed my initial report 3 weeks ago. The investigation is already underway. Those business cards belong to the team that's been building your case." "You can't prove any of this," Miranda whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can. See, the beautiful thing about financial crimes is that everything leaves a paper trail. Bank records, property transfers, forged signatures, it's all documented. And thanks to your husband's tendency to discuss illegal activities over text message and email, we have what prosecutors like to call a slam dunk case." I reached into the folder and pulled out another section. "This is my favorite part, though. Derek, do you remember that business loan you took out using Dad's company as collateral? The one you arranged while he was sedated after his procedure? Derek said nothing, but the sweat beading on his forehead answered for him. Well, it turns out that loan was arranged with known associates of a money laundering operation. The FBI has been tracking their activities for 2 years, and your loan applications led them directly to your business dealings. Congratulations, Derek. You're not just facing elder abuse charges. You're also under investigation for conspiracy to commit money laundering. My mother finally found her voice. Savannah, surely we can work this out as a family. There's no need to involve outsiders. Oh, but there is, Mom, I said, turning to face her directly. Because you see, what happened here tonight proves that I'm not part of this family anymore. You made that very clear. So I'm treating this exactly what it is. A criminal enterprise that I have a legal and moral obligation to expose. I stood up and walked around the table, looking at each of them in turn. Derek, you're looking at 5 to 10 years for elder financial abuse, fraud, and money laundering. Miranda, as an accessory and co-conspirator, you're probably looking at 3 to 5. Mom, your participation in the emotional manipulation and conspiracy to conceal the crimes makes you liable for accessory charges as well. And Dad, I said, stopping behind his chair and placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, you're the victim in all of this. But you're also about to get all of your money back, plus interest, plus damages. The FBI has already frozen Derek's accounts and put holds on all the transferred properties. My father looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Savannah, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know what they were doing. I know, Dad. That's why you're getting a lawyer instead of a jail cell. Derek finally exploded. You smug bitch. You think you've won something? You've destroyed this family. No, Derek, I said calmly. You destroyed this family the moment you decided that stealing from your own father was acceptable. I just documented the destruction and called the appropriate authorities to clean up the mess. I gathered my things and headed toward the door, pausing to deliver my final words. Oh, and Derek, remember how you said it would be better if I didn't attend family gatherings anymore? Well, you won't have to worry about that. Where you're going, they don't allow visitors on Christmas. As I reached the front door, I turned back one last time. Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your presents as much as I enjoyed giving them. I walked out into the cold December night, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been my family. But for the first time in months, I felt lighter than air. Justice had been served, my father was protected, and the people who had betrayed us both were about to face the consequences of their actions. 3 months later, Derek was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Miranda received 4 years for conspiracy and accessory charges. My mother, in exchange for her cooperation with the investigation and testimony against Derek, received 2 years of probation and was required to attend financial crimes education classes. My father recovered every penny of the stolen money plus damages and interest. More importantly, he recovered his dignity and his faith in the legal system. We've rebuilt our relationship slowly, and while it will never be the same as before, it's based on truth and mutual respect rather than obligation and manipulation. As for me, I got promoted to program director at Richmond Community Services, where I now run a specialized unit focused on elder financial abuse prevention. Turns out that experience with family betrayal made me exceptionally good at recognizing and stopping similar crimes against other vulnerable adults. So here's my question for all of you watching this story unfold. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? When people show you who they really are, do you believe them the first time, or do you make excuses until the evidence becomes overwhelming? Sometimes, the hardest justice to serve is against the people we love most, but that doesn't make it any less necessary. Family should be about love, support, and protection, not exploitation and betrayal. When blood relatives become blood parasites, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is cut them off before they bleed you dry. If this story resonated with you, or if you've faced similar family drama, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe that justice delayed is justice denied, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up to family bullies and choosing your own path over toxic family obligations. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they don't owe loyalty to people who abuse their trust. And remember, sometimes the best Christmas present you can give yourself is the gift of knowing your own worth. Thank you all for joining me on this wild ride through family dysfunction and sweet, sweet karma. Here's to choosing justice over blood, truth over comfort, and self-respect over family approval. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're given, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Until next time, remember that you deserve better than people who treat you like you're disposable, even if those people happen to share your DNA. Stay strong, stay true, and never let anyone convince you that abuse is acceptable just because it comes wrapped in family ribbons.